the question of has it been kept secret or how could it be kept secret? It hasn't been kept secret. It's been there all along. But it has been the subject of disinformation in order to deflect attention and to create confusion so that the truth doesn't come out. Disinformation is simply another method of stonewalling. And that's been used consistently for the last 50 years or so.
This is it, dudes. This is what we came to see.
No Navy planes that we could see.
There were no jets, no planes of any kind, no helicopters. We did see something, in fact, we did see something right around 5:45. And around 5:50, that's when we saw the first saucer come out of Area 51. Right. It stayed around for about 10 minutes.
Yep.
And then it went back down.
Right.
Any evidence whatsoever. We'll let you know. We'll call George even. Let him know.
They're called DUMBs, like you can learn a lot from this dummy, but DUMB stands for Deep Underground Military Base, and or a Deep Underground, DUM-2, for instance, is a submarine base, and I have built a few of those too, which are off our continental shelves and then certain islands and out in the Atlantic and the Pacific in strategic locations. All this, I can hardly, in an hour's time, I can hardly squeeze all this in. So I'll be kind of rambling here if you just bear with me.
He's been talking to Ron about it a lot. They were doing a little digest. And then his dad died, and he found all this stuff in the basement. Well, Ron was murdered that same year, and that infuriated Philip. He says, how dare they come in and kill my friends? I saw the original envelopes with the original paperwork that had the drawings on it. I saw the original photographs with the stamps on the back from the Navy. I mean, it was all real stuff.
Author Ron Rummel was about to publish a book revealing what he believed to be the real purpose of the Star Wars project when his body was found here in McClay Park in Portland, Oregon. His death was ruled suicide, but few agree with that verdict.
As far as the police and the FBI are concerned, it's case closed. Unfortunately, there's the shocking thing that his murderer, I believe his murderer, is still out there at large.
Why is it you're speaking out?
There have been enough lives taken under the premise of suicide when they were actually very stable individuals. They had families and they had lives to look forward to, and they had every reason to live. And if there is some form of conspiracy out there, then the more people that are talking might end up saving lives in the long run.
Over a period of time, I became well acquainted with him. I found him to be a person of integrity and honesty. And about 1 year ago, he became totally fed up with the New World Order and the establishment. He thought he was working for the betterment of mankind and the work that he was doing as a geologist for our government as well as for NATO. And he found out that it could be and was actually anything but that. And I urged him last winter and spring to go public and lecture. Finally got him out. He's given over 30 lectures to date, all very successful, very interesting. In fact, so successful there have been 13 attempts on his life since the beginning of the year, and he's survived them all.
I don't want to gore you women out, but I was shot in the shoulder up here.
All I can say is God must be protecting him because he has a message.
Just bear with me. The main topic of my discussion here is to link up basically what's going on with these deep underground military bases, what they're being used for, what is the present situation now being employed both by our federal government, which is slowly being phased out by the United Nations government, as well as the New World, end quote, the New World Order, which is an even higher entity, and who these higher entities are taking their orders from.
What's going on and nothing, and there was kind of a lull in the conversation. He says, John, what do you know about cloning? And I said, nothing. I mean, this was so far out to me. And he said, just let me tell you, it's all real and it's all happening. And this is from Cecil McMain's, a guy who's so down to earth, who worked on the SR-71, who did a lot of stuff, you know, and he would never, ever come out with something so unusual. I mean, I did my stint for the CIA. I believed in, God, the apple pie, and Chevrolet, and, flying saucers to me were, just, you couldn't even mention it. I wasn't interested then.
We have both seen the film that was taken out of the Dulce facility. This is a facility that's run by the United States government.
Yeah, there's no question that Dulce exists. I was the one that kind of led the research on that. I was at a meeting in Crestone, Colorado, and Tom Adams handed me a letter from a lady who lives in Las Vegas, and she was the one that tipped us off that this thing exists. She knew the location of some photos and videotape that had been taken inside Dulce by a guard who escaped during what they call the Dulce Wars of 1979.
The unbelievable part, I was involved in building another base inside of Dulce, New Mexico, which is Los Alamos Laboratory. It's a biological laboratory. When I saw Green Beret and Black Beret people encamped inside of our geologist camp, I knew something was up, the gig was up. And about from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot-tall alien gray.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I played that clip for you on the last show with the news report.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff people were saying in that area was the ground would open up, things would come flying out of the ground, stuff would fly into the mountain, ships they'd never seen before. Yeah. And then the other side of it is they would see weird creatures running around. Stuff that is not natural, and I'm talking stuff beyond Bigfoot, that is just not natural. And as you really look into the Dulce, what's going on out there, it kind of goes back to what Chris was saying with the whole, what they called zoos, how they were manipulating DNA just to see what they could create, just to see what they could develop on their own. And, Chris told me that in some of these zoos, they were seeing some, weird creatures, stuff, like mermaids. And I kind of laughed when Chris said mermaids, but Chris was saying, well, it's not what you think. It's not like the Disney mermaid. It's a half man, half fish that they don't live very long. And, if you give someone unlimited budget, you give them unlimited technology and say, have at it, I could see them creating this crap.
And the other thing is, they're not only building underground bases, they're building undersea underground military bases. And if you've got some kind of aquatic humanoid working for you, how much easier is that going to make the whole job? A lot. Now, the reason that I think they were so up in arms against Phil was because he mentioned that the reason that he came out and talked about this is that there was basically a two horrible part plan. One is the New World Order, the globalists, the elitists, whatever you want to call them. trying to get all the governments on Earth to work together and create a one world government. And but the part that Phil was really up in arms about is that it wasn't our idea. It was the aliens that were pushing for this, and they wanted to have ultimate control of everything that went on here through their puppet humans that were, pretending to be the leaders of these countries and pretending to make the decisions, when in fact they were not. Just for the Bigfoot people out there, I should mention that the first time that Phil ever spoke in front of an audience about this was a closed meeting. It wasn't open to the public, and it was over in Oregon in front of a group called the Western Bigfoot Society. So there's your Bigfoot connection, but very, very slow.
Really? That's interesting. I didn't know that.
And, and the other thing, that like you bring up here, how far is the Skinwalker Ranch from the Archuleta Mesa? You hear a lot of the same sort of things coming from there.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is it goes back to what Chris was saying. With when they unleash some of these DNA experiments, the best places they do it are in poor areas and around the Native American reservations, because no one's going to believe some poor hillbilly living up in the mountains. He ran into a half man, half something. And then the Native Americans, most people, they I hate to say this, but the general public, just think they're a bunch of crazy people with their old folklores and their old ideas. And but I'm telling you, you have to stop and really listen to what some of these people are saying. And I guess for me, I've become desensitized to it because I've heard it in the past from other witnesses I've spoken to, where they've told me this off-the-wall, crazy alien thing they ran into, or half man, half something they ran into. And then I talked to these government insiders, and they kind of give you the breakdown. They'll give you little bits and pieces of information. And then you listen to like what Phil says, and it kind of puts it all together. And like I just said, man, it's terrifying that the New World Order, if you said that 20 years ago, people thought you were nuts.
Right.
Today, it seems more plausible. Less people laugh at that than they did 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as far as the disposition of the base there, we might as well give a little info on that, because they, like I said, already completed the one. They're working on the other one. And the timing here is interesting because when did all these weird sightings start and the whole Skinwalker Ranch start? Now, according to Phil, this first base was completed and all this stuff started up in the 70s, probably early 70s. So by the mid-70s, there would have been people around that area seeing weird things. And isn't that right about when that stuff started happening?
I think it was. I think it was mid-70s.
And again, this once again backs up, what Phil had to say. And according to him, the Dulce base, the original one that they had that's supposedly still there, has 7 levels to it. There might be 8. The information I got said 7. And the layout of it as follows. First floor is security and communications. Second is human staff housing. The third is executive offices and laboratories. Now, below the third floor, humans aren't supposed to go. So the guy that was telling you this other story, that jives completely with the rest of this information. Fourth was mind control experiments, and apparently some human technicians and alien technicians were both working together on this. Some of the humans actually had access to level 4. Beyond that, none of them did. 5th level was the housing for the alien greys. 6th level was genetic experiments, and 7th level was cryogenic cold storage. So did this guy say he went down to the 6th level?
I can't remember if he said the 6th or 7th level, and he could hear. No, it was they could go down. I believe he said to the 6th level, and the 7th and 8th level. He said from the 6th level you could hear people screaming. I think he went down to the 7th level, 7th or 8th level by mistake.
Good God!
And there was people in cages. There was kids in cages, and that's disturbing too because Phil brings that up. He says there's missing kids and there's missing people, and this guy was saying.
According to Phil, the numbers are 18,000 aliens and 20,000 plus humans that are there, either in a capacity to work with them or as slaves that are being used for medical experiments. So
you really hope this stuff isn't true. You know what I mean? My gut tells me it's probably true, but my heart tells me I hope it's not true. I hope it's not going on.
Me too.
I really do.
If this is true, it's one of the most horrible things that possibly could end up being true. And, I think at this point it might be we might want to go back a little bit before Phil and talk about some of the stuff that happened with his family, because now I've done some digging on his dad, and his dad's name was Oscar. And Oscar apparently was born in 1905 in Germany. By the time he was 15 years old, he was a master machinist. When World War II came around, he ended up joining the Navy, and he became a captain in a submarine in the Navy. And in right around 1941, something happened. He was captured by the French, and well before Project Paperclip happened, the French shipped him over here to the U.S. And upon arrival in the U.S., he was debriefed. They gave him a commission in the U.S. Navy as a captain. They created a whole fake background for him, saying that he'd been born in Northern California and that he actually had a degree in medicine. And they put him to work on the Philadelphia experiment. Now, why would they have this U-boat commander working on the Philadelphia experiment? Well, according to other people that have done some digging on this, his dad, just like Phil, was a friggin' genius. And he actually knew a lot about mathematics and computation specifically relating to time. And apparently the Nazis had a big program over there, which may have been related to the Bell, where they were trying to figure out a method to move objects and presumably people through time. And part of the Philadelphia experiment had to do with that, although they weren't trying to do time travel. They were trying to figure out a way to basically cloak or render invisible an entire huge ship or something along those lines. And part of the experiment had to do with the time distortion that was causing it. And, you know, if you want more information on the Philadelphia experiment, plenty out there. You can go look that up. But at the time, shortly before his father died, his father told Phil that, no, I'm not Jewish. We're not from America. I'm actually from Germany. I was a U-boat commander, and that's where the family came from. And so this sort of shook up Phil's world in a big way to start with. And then I think the rest of the stuff that went on afterwards was sort of the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were.
Phil, he was pretty good friends with John Lear.
Mm-hmm.
And some pretty high up people. And I watched an interview one time with John Lear, you know, Learjets.
Yep.
And John Lear said he believed Phil. He said he's known him for a long time. He believed his story. He believed that this was going on. And it just, you know, like I said, it's just disturbing, man. I really hope it's not true.
Yeah, it really is. And there's other things that, now, according to his buddy Al Bielek, and if you guys want to look him up, he's involved with some other weird stuff, which has to do with time manipulation and opening stargates and all this kind of strange stuff. But he was convinced that Phil was telling the truth and that each one of them had part of the story and that they should both be coming forward and sharing this information with people so they knew what was actually going on. And so he was one of the main reasons that Phil started doing these public speeches and letting people know what was going on, because basically his friend Al had talked him into it. And this is another guy that's, if you read the background on this guy and the stuff that he claims and stuff, it just sounds so amazingly far out there in left field, it's just hard to even swallow it, even if you've got a lot of collaborating information, which, by the way, there is some. But the Montauk Project is another one to look at. Both of them knew about that. Phil was not directly involved in it, but had knowledge of it and basically didn't talk about it. So, you know, this is like, again, when you open up the story on Phil, you open up a whole can of worms, and it can go in all sorts of different directions depending on what you want to research on it.
Yeah, and a guy like Phil, what do you do with him when he's talking too much?
Yeah.
You don't, you're going to take him, you're going to bring him in and have a tribunal or take him to court, or, you know, you kill him is what you do. You get rid of him, you know, because all that other stuff draws way too much attention. And yeah, you know, it's too bad they killed this guy. It really is. I'm convinced they killed him.
I pretty much am too. Just if you look at the circumstances of his death, it's so suspicious, and they contradict themselves over and over and over again. And there wasn't a proper investigation done. The family never got to saw the body. You know, I mean, my God, if you want a perfect situation for, you know, an assisted suicide that was not by choice, there it is.
Yeah. Sounds like cops are coming for you.
They're coming to get me. Well, the other thing that I thought might be interesting that we should probably bring up while we're on this whole subject is you know, one of the reasons that me and Wes both think that the aliens, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, are not what they pretend to be, is because they've been caught lying over and over and over again. If you remember back in the early 50s when, or late 40s even, when these saucers first started showing up, and there were people that were actually having supposedly encounters with these aliens and whatnot, one of the first groups that they met were called the Tall Nordics. They looked like big blonde humans that were, like genetically perfect or something. Sounds like Hitler's breeding plan. Anyway, they claimed that they were coming from Venus. Now, back in the late 40s and the 1950s, we had no way to vet that information. Nowadays, according to NASA, if you believe them, we know that there's a cloud cover over Venus. It's a global warming situation gone mad. The surface temperature is like 800 degrees. Nothing could live on the planet. Okay. So as soon as we found that out, the Greys now that we were supposedly in communication with told us that they're from Zeta Reticuli. They're from an entirely different star system, which is further away, unvettable at that point. Now, again, we got more information on this, and it's starting to look like us that that's not true either. So what's the latest story? Well, the latest story is they're claiming they came from the Andromeda Galaxy. And that's too far away for us to be able to take a close-up look to know for sure if they came from there or not, ever. The other thing that ties into this is the Nazis during World War II. It's well known that Hitler was a member of some secret societies, Tula being one of them. But they also had another group working with them called the Vril. And the Vril were this really weird secret society that were probably the only ones on Earth that had all women leaders. And they claimed that they were getting telepathic communications from aliens on another star system. And these telepathic communications were being written by the person that was getting them, Maria Orsic from Zagreb, Yugoslavia, if I remember right. And she didn't know what it was that they were giving her because she was just doing automatic writing and writing it down, and it wasn't in a language or an alphabet that she or anybody else around there understood. So apparently through some means, probably through the intelligence service of the Waffen-SS, they managed to contact another woman who actually knew what these characters were and came over and translated it. She has a code name. Nobody knows what her real name is. They called her Zigrun. Anyway, Zigrun said that these actually were written in the same script, same language as the Babylonians had been using, and that these aliens were telling them that they had actually come and helped establish the Babylonian civilization thousands of years ago. And it also had certain similarities to phonetically to German. So they managed to translate this information, and what it was basically blueprints or an explanation on how they could make a sort of a generator that was unlike any of the internal combustion engines or anything that we had at the time, that would practically run forever and as side effects could basically warp reality, create its own little bubble of reality around it. So you could go at like 3,000 miles an hour and make a right angle turn because you're not being affected by the Earth's gravity. You had your own little gravity reality bubble around you. So this would explain why the flying saucers could do all these crazy maneuvers that no human could possibly survive if they were inside of it. And apparently, according again to the rumors circulating around World War II, the Vril had one up and running before World War II had gotten very far, and they didn't want to share this information with the Nazis. So the Nazis had their own unit of the Waffen-SS, I think it was Unit 4, that was actually working on this, and they were trying to do the same thing. By the end of the war, they actually had a couple of these things that were functional. They even claimed that there were sightings by the German troops and the Russian troops of one of these things floating over the battlefield during the Battle of Kursk, which for military people know this is the hugest tank battle that ever occurred in human history. There's like 3 million people involved in it on both sides. And just, unbelievable horror went on for days before the Nazis finally bogged down and had to give up the effort and withdraw. But there's, still blueprints and drawings and stuff of these things floating around, claiming that the Nazis did, in fact, have this technology by the end of the war. They just didn't have enough of it and enough of the material for the engines to make enough to be worth anything to help with the war effort. And that sort of jives with the what do they call it, the Swallow, their operational jet fighter that they had at the end of World War II. Those things were awesome, and they could go like 150 miles an hour faster than the fastest Allied plane could go. But they didn't have very many of them. Remember, they were having to build everything underground at that point. We were bombing the living crap out of everything on the surface, so it made it more difficult for them. And of course, raw materials were getting more and more scarce. And they finally gave Hans Ulrich Rudel control of all of the jet fighters at the end of the war, and just left it up to his discretion. And he actually was planning on crash landing them into Allied military airstrips and doing as much damage as he possibly could that way. And the rest of the men underneath him talked to him about it and said, look, the war's over. We lost. There's no way we can win. This is just like futility. It's just pointless for us to throw our lives away on this. And apparently at some point they talked sense into him. He agreed with them. For those that are interested in Mr. Rudel, he then went to Argentina and became the head of their Air Force. Okay? So there's some weird connections there, and there's reason to believe that maybe World War II, as it's been presented to us, was a lot different than what people are trying to say.
Yeah, and there's places in Argentina that they claim Hitler went to.
Yeah, so they know for a
and which isn't too far off, because in some of those areas,
they know for a fact that there were a bunch of Nazi subs, top of the line subs now, that were in Argentina and actually surrendered there at the end of the war, and 2 of them had come up from Part2. Well, what's south of Argentina? Antarctica.
Oh.
And that's another thing. Nazis claimed, actually, no less person than Admiral Dönitz claimed that they had built an impregnable stronghold for their Fuhrer at the far ends of the earth. And there's a bunch of other information that points in the direction of Antarctica being where they built some sort of secret hidden base. And even just the routes that the U-boats would follow toward the end of the war, they knew they were going to Antarctica and back for some reason. They didn't know if they had a fuel depot there or what was going on, but when they were patrolling and prowling around the southern hemisphere, that was a place that they regularly went to. So again, there's that strange thing there. And there's some people that even think that, Hitler didn't commit suicide in the bunker. There's actually pretty good evidence for that. And that he escaped. Hanna Reich might have been the one that flew him out of Germany in a Feisler Storch, because she did land right next to the bunker shortly before he supposedly committed suicide. It was crazy, but she was a crazy pilot. And so, there's some that saying he went to Argentina. Maybe he did. And there's some that saying he went to Antarctica. Well, maybe he went to Argentina first, then Antarctica. But, that's neither here nor there. But the point here being that a lot of this stuff just doesn't jive. If you want to vet what we've supposedly been told by the aliens, it does not jive with facts. And so I believe they're liars. I don't believe that they are aliens. I think they're demons in disguise. They've got an agenda, and they're just working for their boss to try and take complete control of the world.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And like I said, and if you look up historically, they had the Grey Neighbors when I had Gary Wayne on, he talked about the Grey Neighbors or the fairies, and they flew around in flying machines and they would kidnap people and take them up. I mean, this has been going on since the beginning of time. And it's just given a different name. They're given a different identity, but the story is basically the same. So I tend to agree with you. Again, I could be wrong on it, but it's fascinating to listen to, especially this Phil Schneider. If you've never, I'm sure most of the audience has seen this before, but first time I ever saw this, I was blown away by this guy. I was blown away. I mean, he's not the greatest storyteller in the world. He's you can tell he's logical and very to the facts, but it's fascinating. His story is fascinating. What happened to him is fascinating. His death, everything around this guy is just very interesting to me.
It is to me too. And like I said, this whole can of worms with Phil, once you open it up, there's a lot of directions you can go with it. Montauk Project, the Philadelphia experiment, the Germans doing the Bell experiment in World War II, Project Paperclip, the Schwabenland, their secret base down in Antarctica. Why is it that, let's just touch on this Antarctica thing for a quick second. Why is it that the largest expedition ever mounted to Antarctica was a military expedition by our Navy, headed by no less a person than Admiral Byrd? And they were supposed to be down there and doing scientific research. Well, why do you need a whole flotilla of Navy ships, including an aircraft carrier and a submarine, to go do research down there? And supposedly they lost several ships and a bunch of their planes and a bunch of people. Well, these things don't just crash. These people know what they're doing. They know how to fly a plane around. If they're going to have a problem with it or something, they'll try and ditch, and somebody will pick them up or whatever. The claim is, and I've seen the same claim from a Russian producer of all things. There's a Russian general that came up and talked about this, and they did a video of it, and it jives exactly with the other information, that really they got there and they were attacked by a bunch of flying saucers and Nazi jets who pummeled the crap out of them. And they decided that they had taken so much damage, and not knowing if they were going to get attacked again, it was just unfeasible to stay there. And their mission that was supposed to last like 8 months lasted like 8 weeks or something, and they had to turn around and come back again. Well, why send a naval flotilla to Antarctica to start with? And this is shortly after the war ended, 48 or 47, if I remember right.
Wasn't Operation Paperclip, wasn't that where they were taking Nazi scientists and saying you're American now? And wasn't that what Paperclip was?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. We were trying to scoop up all of the Nazi scientists that were really involved in all this spectacular high tech that the Germans were coming out with at the end of the war, and get them over here before the Russians nabbed them. And then, of course, they would have the technology and could conceivably use it against us. And so we were trying to grab up as many of them as we could. And there were some really big names. The head of NASA was, I believe, a former colonel in the Waffen-SS at one point. And Werner von Braun was a major or a colonel in the Waffen-SS. And guys that go to... If you're just a member of the SS, maybe it's just because you like the uniform and you wanted to play along with Hitler or whatever, but really, most of these people were just absolutely fanatical. You really couldn't be in the SS unless you were a fanatic, and the ones that were the officers were the ultimate fanatics. So wait a minute, all of a sudden we're going to absorb all these scientists that are fanatic Nazis, and they're just all of a sudden going to decide that our way is the best, and they're going to be great Americans, and they're going to do things our way. Who had that lapse in judgment? Yeah. And the other scary thing about Project Paperclip that a lot of people don't know about is that General Reinhard Gehlen, who was in charge of the whole intelligence wing for the Nazis that was in Eastern Europe, so it'd be basically what became the Soviet Union afterwards, and in Russia, was absorbed into the CIA wholesale. They took that whole intelligence unit with all the people in it and General Gehlen still in command and just absorbed them into the CIA and let them provide information for us. Now, that's an astounding lapse in common sense and judgment.
Now, a look at a moment when national security interests trumped ethical concerns. Jeffrey Brown has our book conversation.
Nazi scientists, some of them tied to war crimes, including horrific concentration camp experiments, brought to the U.S. in a secret program to advance American security interests during the Cold War. It sounds like the plot of a film drama, but it actually happened, and on a large scale. The story is told in the new book, Operation Paperclip. Author and journalist Annie Jacobson joins us now. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
So these were top scientists in the German war effort, sought out by the U.S. military as the war was coming to an end.
That's right. These were Hitler's top weapons makers, and Operation Paperclip became a classified military program to bring them to the United States. It also had a public face, so there was, on the one hand, the truth about the program kept secret, and on the other hand, the idea that we'll tell the public that these are the good Germans.
And the good Germans, but they were dedicated Nazis, the ones you write about. We should say there are many, 1,600 in all, right?
Yes.
You document about 21 of them, dedicated Nazis, some, as I said, involved in horrific stuff. What they did was known, right, to the people to the Americans who were seeking them out.
Certainly to the American military intelligence officers who were interviewing them. The idea that they were involved in war crimes was really necessary to be kept secret, and that's exactly what happened. And so in the book, I think I unveil a lot of the truth about this program that has remained clouded for decades.
Yeah, I guess to put it in perspective, it'd be like us bringing ISIS people in or Al-Qaeda people in. It's like, well, you're a scientist, you're we'll make you an American now, and just shady, man.
Yeah,
Shady.
we don't care how many
all the people that
you
died.
cut off or how many you've executed. We need that information. So you can be an American now. That's just fine.
Yeah. It's sickening.
It really is. And the same thing with, look at the experiments that the Japanese did in World War II on prisoners. They're using prisoners for doing, medical experiments and stuff on. We got all of that information from them in return for not prosecuting their war criminals. You ever wonder why there wasn't any Japanese being prosecuted in Nuremberg? That's why.